You're with Julian on the brown note and a look at the boxing controversy in the Olympics, and I'm not going to go over this interminable story, which has just been... I'm actually going to talk more about the online response to the story than anything else. Obviously, Algeria's Imane Khelif and Taiwan's Lin Yuting were banned from the World Championships of Boxing by the International Boxing Association, the IBA, in 2023, but allowed to compete in the Olympics, feeding this enormous trans men in women's sports thing, which has been incredibly dominant over recent years and been this amazingly polarizing online discussion where common sense has absolutely no place. This with the caveat that neither was apparently trans or even intersex, but both were born as women and in all likelihood have something incredibly rare like I think it's Swire's disease or something, like 1 in 20,000 women have, instead of XX chromosomes, they have XY chromosomes like men. And that has led to the IBA claiming that they're male and the IOC claiming they're not, and everyone taking their pitchforks up on either side of the fence and yelling at each other. Even though everyone found out that they weren't trans or intersex and so on, there's just been no room for common sense in this debate. And if I like my own side, I'm going to attack my own side, which is the lefties. Even if you say the common sense, you're attacked as a fascist. And like both sides are saying the same things and claiming victory. Like the left is saying, oh, now the right wing agrees that genetics, that your genitals don't make up your gender. Oh, and they're claiming to be victorious. And the right is saying, oh, now the left agrees that your genitals do make up your gender, and they're claiming to be just as victorious. It's been one of the most ridiculous online debates ever. The underlying thing as well is the IBA, the International Boxing Association, stripped its previous leader for corruption. I mean, the level of corruption at the IBA and the stripping of the previous leader and, you know, the monetary payments and throwing bouts and all this sort of stuff compared to what FIFA do to football, I don't think was in the same ballpark. But the fact that the IBA is now run by a Russian oligarch or something like that anyway, has fed fuel to the fire that the IBA is this corrupt organisation and that they're working on behalf of Russia and that the IOC, the Olympic Committee, is working on behalf of the West. But really, Russia doesn't really have anything to do with Algeria or Taiwan, particularly. I mean, they're not going to be going after an Algerian boxer. This doesn't make sense. There's been so much like garbage on this online. There's so many really bad analogies, like about the Dutch convicted rapist of a 12-year-old girl when he was 19 competing in the volleyball. Oh, people are upset against this female boxer, but they're not upset against this rapist. Who says this? Who's been saying they're not upset about both? It's a complete lie. So is this thing, oh, people that are happy about women being beaten at home aren't, you know, they're the ones that are complaining about a woman being beaten by a man in the ring. Who's saying that either? It's just complete made up garbage. But one of the interesting ones is people keep bringing up Michael Phelps. Now, on the YouTube version, I'll put in the comments my the trans women in women's sports piece that I did a few years ago. It's very even-handed, I think. And one of the main points is that genetic unfairness is part of sport. It always is. You know, you're genetically predisposed to being good at certain things. And I used the example in my previous piece from a few years back of Ian Thorpe, and I can't remember his name, but the long-distance runner from the UK, Mo Farah. So you've got Ian Thorpe, who's 6'7" or whatever, and 95 kilos and size 19 feet, and Mo Farah against him in the swimming pool is allowed, and obviously he has genetic unfairness. But then again, if you went to 10,000 meters, suddenly Ian Thorpe doesn't have any genetic fairness. The genetic fairness has swapped. So it does depend on the sports. But people are bringing up Michael Phelps and his physical attributes. But Michael Phelps isn't punching his opponents in the face. There is certain sports where physical strength, power, and stamina are preeminent in the safety of your opponent and the fairness of the sport. And one of those is boxing. And we know that because boxing has weight classes. Michael Phelps wouldn't be allowed to box someone much smaller than him. In this instance, the question that has not been answered conclusively by the IBA or the IOC is, does Imane Khelif possess male characteristics to the extent... So if you had a pound-for-pound boxer, and boxing is pound-for-pound because it's deemed to be unsafe and unfair to box somebody in a bigger weight class than you. But if you were a man and a woman who were genetically exactly the same physical mass, the man's biology would be the equivalent of a few weight classes above the woman, based on the way that the male body develops muscles, processes oxygen, and so on. So that's the question, and neither side is coming out and answering this question. And if it is deemed that the genetic makeup of Algeria's Imane Khelif has male characteristics to the extent where that is true, then she should be banned. Even though she is a woman and it's hard, we talk about these things as though they're human rights. Being able to live with peace and dignity and not be punished in any way for who you're born as is one thing, but saying that you have to compete in a specific sport at a specific level against a specific opponent is wish list stuff. That's not that's not a human right. You really want to do something, but you can do lots of other things as well. And if in this instance it's deemed that you are much more powerful than your opponents due to no fault of your own, then maybe competitive boxing isn't the world that you belong in. And I don't care what you say about how that's, it's wish list stuff. Certain people have really spoilt this issue, and we don't call them selfish arseholes enough, but Leah Thomas has done more damage to trans people than any other person that's ever lived. And they're a selfish arsehole, and everyone can see that that is genetic unfairness. In this instance, it's not so clear. Everyone points to, the previous bouts and so on. But I think if you're in this and you really want to pursue it, you have to waive your medical confidentiality, because both the IBA and the IOC are hiding behind medical confidentiality. We know that Imane has... allegedly has XY chromosomes, but we don't know what impact that has. Has it given her enough male characteristics for her to be essentially genetically male against female opponents? We don't know, because they won't tell us. And I think if you want medical confidentiality, then you don't have to be boxing at a competitive level. If you are, your opponents deserve to have that information to make the decision themselves. And even though the left, my side, are screaming about this being a non-trans issue, why are they still fighting as though it is? Because they sure as hell have rubbished the other female boxer. It doesn't sound like it's feminism that they're defending here at all. They're making many of the same arguments in the same way with the same vitriol as though they were defending trans people. Yet this isn't about trans people. And it isn't at all. It's got nothing to do with trans people. But they sound like they're still making those same arguments. And they have gone to town attacking that Italian boxer, who is also a woman. So it doesn't sound particularly feminist to me. Anyway, that's my 2 pence on the most overblown story of the year.